Hello and welcome to Archive West Texas. I'm your host, Gordon Wilkerson, joined as always by our producer, Rachel Boyd. Today we're continuing our conversation with former Lubbock Mayor Alan Henry. We're going to expand on his time in city leadership in this episode today. Alan, thank you again for joining us.
Thank you.
Welcome back to Archive West Texas. At what point did you think about running for city council? You talked about in our last session that you took a job as the chairman of the Planning and Zoning Commission, which is no small feat in and of itself. But what were your early civic service roles like, and how did that prepare you for a broader role?
Well, actually, I guess you'd go back to some of the earliest when, sounds corny, but the Boy Scouts teach you about citizenship. I became an Eagle Scout, did a lot of volunteer work around the city, as you did when you got your Eagle.
Were you in Mr. Halsey's troop?
No, I was not. I was I was in the other troop. At that time, Boy Scouting was so popular that the First Baptist Church actually had 2 Boy Scout troops. And my troop was Troop 3.
There you go.
Which meant that it was even older than the First Methodist, which was Troop 5.
Wow.
And I think you were Troop...
We were 409.
Yeah,
so
you were
we'd
409,
been around a while.
But if that doesn't make you feel old to know that your daddy was in Troop 3, at any rate, I would say just various aspects of my life. Becoming the community ambassador, I became interested in the city. When I came back as a community ambassador for Argentina, I gave 101 speeches in a year to different clubs. I learned about Lubbock, learned it through osmosis. And so I don't know that there was ever just a moment that I decided I want to run for city council, but it led to that.
You talked about in the last episode, you were born in 1942. Community doubled in size in that decade between the 1940 and 1950. But what does the community look like in mid to late 60s when you actually began to take a more active role in leadership?
Well, actually, in the mid to late 60s, I just happened to have here that the city had grown from 71,000 in the 50s to 128,000. It continued to grow as a large, small town. And by that, I mean, we were still picking up trash like we had been when the city was started. The garbage man, you would have your metal trash can. We decided on the city council that maybe dumpsters was a better way to do it. One of the biggest issues at that time, because of all the growth, and we had expansive roadways, but the traffic lights system was still 1948. And so what we saw, and I mentioned a minute ago, about the time that the tornado came along and acted as a catalyst, we were needing to become and wanting to become a small metropolitan city, but we still had the infrastructure and the services of a small West Texas town. And so that's one of the main reasons that I really looked for a way to get involved in the city, because I could see other cities had a lot of advantages over us as far as being, if you want to say, up to date. So that was what I did.
So council and leadership at that point in time was on the cutting edge of helping the city make that transition.
That's correct.
From infrastructure of a 40s and 50s town to the physical resources necessary for this to become a...
That's exactly right. And I give a lot of credit to our city manager, Larry Cunningham. He came to us with some really good, up-to-date ideas. Jim Bertram, the director of planning, was here at the right time, at the right place. So if you think about the time that I was on the council, which was from including P&Z, from 72 through 86, here's some of the things that happened at that time. The Canyon Lakes project. At the time that I went on the council, the Canyon Lakes was a dump ground. It was piles and piles of crushed automobiles and trash and junk. So when we began redoing the city, the part that was damaged by the tornado, it came to everybody's attention that this won't work. So now if you go through the Canyon Lakes parks, you see the artificial lakes that were placed there, the cleanliness. At the time that I went on the city council, we're in the old air terminal across the runway from the current one. That's where the Silent Wings Museum is now. That was all we had for an air terminal. There was no civic center, and people had turned down the bond issue on the civic center. And a quick story there, the people were asked to vote on a bond issue in 1969. And they voted it down, and it would have included the new civic center. It would have included many of the projects were there. So after the tornado, one of the things that happened that was most amazing to me was there was an attitude adjustment in Lubbock. In my memory, and I've been here a long time, those few years after the tornado, we were the most cohesive. They had a more positive view of our community than at any time that I can remember. So the same bond issue that was voted down overwhelmingly in 69 was voted overwhelmingly in favor of it in 1972. So those are the kinds of things that were going on that made it really attractive to me to work at the city level.
Let's talk about the tornado for just a minute. I mean, it is a defining period within this community, but our studios here are at 620 Avenue O. We look out our window to the east,
right,
and at the same area that was just absolutely annihilated by that storm. I don't even know how to. I remember I was 10 years old at the time, and I remember driving around town with my mom and just being utterly flabbergasted at the damage, the destruction. I think the National Guard was here. But from a macro perspective, how did the city leaders, you have to credit Mayor Granberry at some level for bringing in. Yeah. I mean, that's a huge undertaking. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, sure. Where we're sitting now was more or less the heart of the tornado, at least one of them. Apparently there were two, but it took out this entire civic center area was a low income area. It was some businesses, a lot of houses, and that was just virtually devastated. So nature gave us a palette to work with, and that is this entire area needed to be replanned. And as you say, I would give great credit to our planning department, to Jim Bertram. We had a great deal of federal help, Congressman Mahon and others. But I think if you look at what's happened, the genesis for everything that happened with Lubbock, as far as planning, was right here where we are. Things like controversial, like sign standards, billboard standards, like setbacks, things that sound very boring, but they all go into the image that you have of your
as
city.
A community. Mm-hmm. In 1982, you were elected mayor following the untimely death of Mayor Bill McAllister. What do you remember about that moment?
Well, it was, of course, a huge shock to everyone. We had just had city elections a few months before, and I had been elected as mayor pro tem, which is exactly what it says it is, a mayor pro tem who acts instead of the mayor. Not an assistant mayor, and it's not a mayor in waiting. It's a mayor pro tem. So my job was basically to fill in when the mayor was not there, or to go to a ribbon cutting in case he couldn't go, and those sorts of things. But at this time, Sandy and I and Ryan were at a convention for Texas Municipal League in Corpus Christi. Got the call that Mayor McAllister had died during the night. He was only 42, so this was quite a shock. So we got on a plane that morning and flew in that afternoon. And honestly, I didn't know what to expect. There's a lot of press there, and they were wanting a statement and that sort of thing, which obviously was not that difficult to do. And so what became apparent was the way the charter reads is that even though the mayor pro tem is elected to take the place of the mayor, he does not become the mayor. You don't automatically ascend. So we spent 2 or 3 weeks trying just getting everything lined up, and we had a great staff. So then we set an election in August for mayor. Well, in order to be mayor, I had to resign from the council and run. So at that time, for a brief period, we had a 3-member city council. There are those who have said, well, it was just as good as a big council. But that's how that happened. It was a shock, but it was not a major issue as far as the operation of the city is concerned.
I can't speak to before, but it's possible that had never happened before in the city of Lubbock, and I don't think it's happened since.
No,
it's an unusual set of circumstances.
A very unique time.
We talked last segment about the focus on replacing trash cans with dumpsters, getting the traffic signals upgraded, building the civic center, expanding the airport,
right,
putting in the Canyon Lake systems,
right,
all of which were huge endeavors. But you're well known for your work in water resources. Mm-hmm. And I'm pretty sure you can't just decide you want to build a dam somewhere and make a lake. That's got to be a very complex and intricate process. Tell us how Lake Allen Henry developed as conceptually and then actually practically.
Sure. Well, personally, water development has been something I've been interested in for a long time. I was privileged to be appointed to a statewide water plan that was under Governor Mark White back in those days. And so I'd had some experience along that line. And parenthetically, let me say that water development was a huge topic of conversation back at this time. This would be in the 60s. And it was a huge topic, but they were trying to go about it in many different ways. And I don't know whether people realize that we actually had an organization called Water Inc. that was set up to bring water from the Mississippi River. As a matter of fact, the night of the tornado, I was attending a Water Inc. meeting downtown, and we were discussing how to bring water from the Mississippi River. There was another point of thought that it could be brought from Canada. This shows you just how many different ways people were thinking about water. Of course, these were the times that the Ogallala we realized how bad off we were going to be. And that's when the High Plains Underground Water Conservation District was set up. So there was all sorts of activity regarding water. But as far as the city is concerned, the city had a really good plan, a really good policy. And that policy was and continues to be that we needed to depend not only on water wells, but on surface water also. And we needed to have a balance. So at the time that I came on the council, this was a few years after the Canadian River, Lake Sempton, came on. And so we were in pretty good shape, but it was not going to be what we needed. So even about the time that I came on the council in the early 70s, it was realized that we needed to have another lake, not something that you could use and it would fill back up, but it wasn't like the water wells that once you use it, it's gone. And so work began, and primarily with the city staff, but also with Freeze and Nichols Engineering, to come up with a good location. Where would be that place? Well, it turned out that the best and most feasible place for a lake was on the Brazos River. So we began doing water quality studies. The Corps of Engineers studied the water that went through what is now Lake Allen Henry to see if there was enough quantity and if the quality was high enough. Turns out that it did. So you start that with that premise about we need a surface source and we need to be able to access it. And then we build from there. Then you go and get permits from the city and from the state. You do engineering to check up on the geology. Then you have your drawings, and obviously your financing is what you end up with. So it's a long, as you say, it's a long process.
So who are the primary drivers locally on building the lake or on making that a reality? I know you were, but you had help from staff. And
well, yes, I would say that Sam, W-A-H-L, Wall, the area around the lake
is named for
Sam Wall. Sam was our water engineer, degreed. He led the charge on this, but it was done partly in-house and partly by contract.
I'm guessing you had some help from legislators?
Well, of course. But other than putting in a good word, we had two major issues. One was the permitting process, and that, of course, is the Texas Water Development Board, which is a very independent, very powerful board. The other was the Brazos River Authority. This so happens to be the uppermost lake on the Brazos River. So we had to work in connection with the Brazos River. But then to make it even more difficult, we had a great deal of opposition from the ranchers that owned the land that we needed. And we were down there many times talking to the ranchers. And you can see why they didn't want a lake there. They didn't want a bunch of city people coming down there. And so they had actually filed suit. We had 2 federal lawsuits that we had to combat. That was one of the areas that I was able to maybe be effective with on a one-on-one basis. Then as far as the building of the dam, we had a great deal of opposition here in Lubbock. It was something kind of strange to me, but we had a large contingent of people who said, well, it's uphill. It's downhill. Why are you doing uphill? Well, but it's because that's where the water is, and it's kind of like one of the bank robbers. They say, "Why do you always rob a bank?" That's because that's where the money is. Yeah. But at any rate, all of these we had to work our way through, and it was fascinating. They pulled out all the stops in opposition. The opposition, they even came across a Brazos River snake that would be endangered if we built this. And then there was another point of view that said that there are earthquakes there. And if you build a lake, the water will all just go down and disappear. And all of which were good arguments and had to be overcome. And they were not trivial, especially at that time. But we had a very good council. I give credit to every one of them, to our staff, and to the professional engineers. So it took all of us to get it over the finish line.
Yeah. Beyond the lake, what other accomplishments or initiatives from your time serving the city are you most proud of?
Well, this is one that people have forgotten about, but it's probably one of the most difficult that we had to work through. And that was the single-member district issue. For those who don't remember, up until the 80s, the city of Lubbock had a 5-member city council, all elected at large. A lawsuit was filed by, I believe it was NAACP, alleging that minorities could not and had not ever been elected and could not be elected under that setup. And to be honest with you, The 5 members that were on that council where I was lived within probably 20 blocks of each other. So that was very controversial. And of course, the city opposed it. But Judge Woodward found that it was discriminatory. And he said that you need to have a new election and you need to add 2 minority seats. And so during that time, there was a lot of upheaval. This was Vietnam time. Demonstrations were very much in favor and or in order. I don't know if they were in favor.
Well, at the same time, or roughly at the same time, LISD was being integrated.
Exactly.
And we were talking about busing.
And you were on the school.
I was
board.
not on. No, I was not on the school board at that time. I was at Coronado High School, but I remember.
Well, I mean, later on.
No. I remember going to a packed auditorium at Lubbock High.
Sure.
For a hearing and a discussion of busing, and it was very emotional, very, very dramatic.
Right, very. We had an organization here at that time called the Brown Berets. They were certainly forceful. Whether you would go so far as to say militant, I don't know, but it was close to it at any rate. And so we did have some very great discontent in the community. And this is one of the areas where I guess I was more unique, or I was unique in that, as it turned out, I was elected to the city council and mayor. I went through 5 elections, but I was the last mayor under the at-large district. And I was the first mayor under single-member district. So I'm the only one who has actually experienced the difference between a council that's all elected at large and one that's elected in districts. And I think the fact that our council was able to make it through what could have really been a turbulent time, more turbulent time, is a real tribute. And one of the things that I'm proudest of, that we did that. We had 2 very good minority candidates in Maggie Trejo and T.J. Patterson. They did exactly what they were supposed to do. They represented their districts, but they also represented the city. And so I think if I had some effect on that as possibly in working on an individual basis and seeing that went through as calmly as possible, I'm really proud of that.
I think that is truly a testament to your leadership skills. Mm-hmm. And Councilman Patterson and Councilwoman Trejo were outstanding in those roles. They were. Taking a look at our community today, what do you think the biggest challenges we face in the future would be?
That's a really good question. I think that what we are seeing locally is a spillover from what we see nationally, and that is the tendency to govern by partisanship, whether you're a Democrat or you're a Republican. The city has always been nonpartisan. Now, I'm not going to get into anybody's politics, but the times that we have moved forward the best have been times like after the tornado, when people were more or less on the same wavelength. But it's not anybody's fault. It's just that as the city grows, there are more factions. There's nothing new about having factions, incidentally. Everybody's always had their own candidate. But I think the more that we make a conscious effort to govern by what is fair, and that to me is what I've always felt like needs to be our motto, is almost like the Rotary. Is it fair to the most people? We are inundated with this national news. We're inundated with the gotchas. And, you can't rule by gotcha.
We talked about in the interview you did with us on Congressman Mahon.
Yeah.
He's running for Congress in 1930, and there's one source of news, and it's the Lubbock Avalanche Journal. Mm-hmm. Today, you got Instagram, you got Facebook, you got all these Twitter, correct. You got social media, you got cable channels 24/7. So nobody's singing from the same song sheet anymore.
Right. That's exactly right. And it's almost become a sport. You know, can you top this type thing?
True.
Now, we have had, don't get me wrong, in the past, we've had some bitter elections. We've had, I could name several where there were people who not only didn't like each other, they hated each other. There was one in particular that got cross with the newspaper and got run out of town. So, you know, it's not that everybody was lily white as far as their attitude was concerned, but it was on a limited basis, limited more to people than, is this the best way to pick up garbage? You know.
Apart from your service to the city in elected capacity, you've served on a number of boards. What's kept you so involved in the community, and speak to some of that service and what you...
Well, I have been involved and still am to a great degree. I've always been interested in learning whatever I could and in different areas. I was chairman of the United Way, which was one of the most helpful jobs that I had as far as seeing what all's going on in the community. I was chairman of the Chamber of Commerce, which helped in a great many ways to learn what was going on in the business community. I was involved in the establishment of Goodwill Industries, which I'm really, really proud of. At the present time, I'm just on a couple of boards, and I enjoy that. But what I have to do on every day is to say, you know, you ain't the mayor anymore. You know, it's fine to offer your opinion, but don't expect it to be accepted as well as it was before. At any rate, what I've been trying to do is to be helpful, but stay out of the way.
I think your wisdom is still sought after and on point.
Well, thank you.
Talk to our younger listeners. For anybody who's out there considering a career in public service, what advice would you offer them?
Decide what it is you'd like to do. If you would like to be involved in your community, get started. Be involved in organizations that take you to different areas of town, organizations that take you to various areas of interest, and see what is it that you're interested in. Once you decide that, then do whatever it takes in your mind to accomplish that. Told you a little bit about Congressman Mahon's admonition to me, and that is, you know, if it's worth doing, it's worth succeeding at. And so the idea is to pick out something that you like to do or would like to do and go after it and stay there.
Alan, as you reflect on your legacy, your life and career, what values or principles guided your decisions?
Once again, as we mentioned before, I think trying to make decisions that are fair. Is this something that would be most beneficial to the most people?
There you go. Alan, thank you. Thank you for your service to our community. I'm going to say I'm speaking on behalf of many of our listeners. We appreciate your commitment to Lubbock and the outstanding service that you've provided over the decades. And thank you for taking time to share your story with us.
Glad to do it. Thank you very much. And thank you for having this program and for all that you and your family have done in this community. You have a wonderful record to be proud of.
Oh, thank you. I want to thank you for listening today. Please join us again next week for another episode of Archive West Texas.